Oh, we're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a Money Talk. We're just going to give folks a couple minutes to join us here. Welcome. Happy Tuesday. I think it's a Tuesday during Financial Literacy Month. I'm Jacki Zehner. Just welcome. We're going to give everyone a minute or two to join us before we get started. Hopefully you've got some lunch, you have some coffee. I could give you a little tour of the office behind me. Got a little music that's going to play for a second. We had fun trying to pick a song for this. Welcome. If you're joining, we're just going to give it a minute or two for folks to join us. We're streaming live on 2 different locations, both on StreamYard and on LinkedIn Live. So thank you for joining. We'll just give it a minute for people to join. I start to see people flowing in. Thank you for joining, spending your morning, lunchtime, evening, afternoon with us. Please feel free to say hi in the chat if you want to. We'll just give it another 45 seconds or so before we get going. Welcome if you're joining. We haven't started yet. We're just giving it a few seconds for folks to join us before I do introductions. Hello, everyone. Oh, it's so exciting when people show up in the chat. Kevin, Mohammed, Suhani, Jonathan, Nabi, Kevin, Yaroslava. That's a beautiful name. Thanks for joining, everyone. We're just going to give it another second for folks to join. Samuel says hi to you, Carrie. Hi, Deb. Hi, Oliver. I don't speak English, but beautiful music. Hey, we want to put together a She Money playlist. We're kind of excited about that. Hi, Mackie. Oh, my gosh. So many friends joining. Thank you so much. All right, we're going to get started in just a second. Thank you so much for joining today. We are streaming live on 2 platforms, and encourage, if you want to say hi in the chat, please do. We're also going to do our best throughout the session to pull questions from the chat. If we don't get to yours, I apologize. We'll try to download them. Hi, Jeannie. Thanks to so many. Robin, thank you. So many people. Say hi in the chat if you like. All right, we're going to cut the music, though I kind of want to have a dance party after this. So welcome. Happy Financial Literacy Month. April is a big time here. Well, She Money, we barely started She Money. We actually officially launched in November of last year. But thank you if you're already a subscriber to She Money newsletter here on LinkedIn. And Carrie will post it in the chat, as well as an Ask Carrie newsletter on LinkedIn. So my name is Jacki Zehner. I have, a long history around money. I studied finance. Oh my gosh, I'm embarrassed to say, like 40 years ago. Could it be that many years? Almost, I think. 35 years ago. I went to Goldman Sachs when I graduated from the University of British Columbia. I had a 14-year career at Goldman, where I think I still hold the record as the youngest woman and first female to make partner in 1996. And I am what you call ridiculously, insanely passionate about money, and especially the intersection of women and money and power. And it is Financial Literacy Month, and we are very excited to be having a really special conversation with a friend, someone I've known for a very long time, though we couldn't figure out the very first time we met when we recently chatted, Carrie Schwab-Pomerantz. And Carrie, if you don't know her, again, I encourage you to follow her here on LinkedIn. So Carrie is the board chair and president of the Charles Schwab Foundation, senior vice president of Charles Schwab & Co., and board chair of Schwab Charitable Donor Advised Fund. She's an author of 2 books. Love this one, The Charles Schwab Guide to Finances After 50. And as a woman over 50, I love the idea of talking about sort of women and aging and people in aging. It's not just a book for women, but that's something we're going to talk about today as well. She has over 500,000 followers here on LinkedIn. She's been in the world of personal finance and talking about money for more than a couple of years. And please welcome to the StreamYard stage, Carrie Schwab-Pomerantz. Hi, Carrie.
Hi, Jacki. Thank you for the nice introduction.
Oh, it's so fun to be with you here today. And thank you for saying yes. I think we both do a lot of things around this incredible passion we have. And let's just start there. It's Financial Literacy Month. I could not think of a better person to pull up onto this virtual stage than you, Carrie, because I would say you have a passion for financial literacy and education, might be an understatement. So share a little bit of your origin story in terms of just your background and sort of how you got started in this space, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so I'll kind of start from the beginning, because I do think this passion was driven by my childhood. And you talk about intersection. First of all, my dad founding Charles Schwab and Company way back in 1970, I guess 73. It really didn't become the discount brokerage till 75 that we know, when the SEC deregulated commissions. But anyway, my dad built this company to demystify investing, make it more accessible to more Americans. And I think, it's in the DNA, right? It's definitely in the DNA to really want to help people, especially people who have been sort of, underserved by our, the financial world. But I would say probably the biggest thing that I experienced in my life was when I was 9 years old, and my parents divorced. And it just totally rocked our family. I mean, it's still, we still feel it in our family so many years later. I was 9 years old. My dad was a struggling businessman. He was 15 years before, the people, what people know of him today. My mom was a woman of her generation, where she was a homemaker, but she went to Stanford and she was a Phi Beta Kappa. So very, very smart gal. But after they divorced, in particular, my mom struggled, but they both struggled financially. And, obviously, eventually they, got a hold of things. But I think that greatly affected me and made me realize how important it is for every one of us to be sort of, I'll say, own our finances, have the knowledge, have the capability to really, protect ourselves financially.
Yeah, I think about that a lot too. I mean, we talk a lot about money stories. And, when you think about it, like you shared a story about being 9 years old. I think we all have memories of what are the imprints, right? Of our thoughts about money. What was our family situation? How do we bring that in? Because, and actually, I don't know if I told you this, Carrie, but I think I did. I'm taking this course right now called The Trauma of Money, which is a 12-week certification course. It's offered, that's the name of the platform. And I'm about 5 or 6 sessions in, and it's not only is your own money story. I mean, there could be good parts of it or bad parts of it, but often, what could be a barrier for financial engagement could be more negative experiences around money. And I'm excited just to learn a lot more about that. So thank you for sharing that background. And obviously, you ended up getting into the money space, writing a couple of books. And, obviously are a guru, I would say. I don't know if I like the word guru. I don't know. A goddess? I don't know what the word is.
I like that.
You're a financial goddess. I love that.
There you go.
So when you think about this topic, right, it's Financial Literacy Month. It was created about 20 years ago to drive greater awareness in general for the importance of financial education and literacy, and to drive good money habits. And so how would you sort of frame sort of the state of financial literacy in America? I know it's hard to speak globally, but what comes to mind when you sort of talk about that?
Well, what I didn't say, as I did start at Schwab when I was 16 years old. By the way, I was a file clerk, so I worked myself, up the ranks. And so you're right. This company and demystifying money has been my passion since I was young. I remember in my early 20s helping our clients, our women clients. I would arrange workshops, kind of like what you're doing today, just for women. So that passion is, from the very beginning of time. And so not only running the Charles Schwab Foundation now, which I started that about 20 years ago, and focusing on financial literacy. So my work has been to help people, I'll say, from all walks of life. And what I've learned is that the lack of financial literacy cuts across Americans from all walks of life. And it's blind to socioeconomic status, to gender, and age. I mean, it affects everybody. And then, so you asked about sort of the state of it. And so you've got that, right? And so why is that the case?
Mhm.
And I think it's a bunch of factors that kind of come together. For instance, the pension went away probably during, our, growing up, for most, like our parents and probably, other, folks. But that went away. And then Americans were required to save, not only save, but also invest, have to know how to invest in, for their retirement or whatever. And then on top of that, you've got 22 states, only 22 states that require financial literacy. So you're not learning it in the schools. And then you pile on the fact that the financial industry is so complex, Jackie.
Mhm.
I mean, I think about it, the 401k, the 403b,
Yeah.
the 527, the SEP, the ETFs, robos. I mean, you get my point. It's overly
Yes.
complex. Makes you kind of want to put your head in the sand. But let me share a story that I think will bring it to home. And so about, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, I was introduced to a woman from a very large financial institution who had created this, I'll call it, I guess, an association or a networking group of women who worked for this company and women who had retired from the company. And it was, to bring everybody together. And so she had a passion for women and I did. So we were introduced, we spoke for about an hour. And at the end of that conversation, she was hinting that she wanted me to be the kind of the spokesperson for, around personal finance for these women. And I said, Janet, what? Why would you want me, or somebody from Charles Schwab to come talk about personal finance when you all are, the titans of Wall Street? And she said, Carrie, so many of us made salaries the size of CEOs, and we squandered away and have nothing to show for it. And, again, if people of this stature aren't saving and investing, how can we expect everybody to do that? And so it just confirms how important it is for every one of us to not only have the knowledge, but the discipline to take care of ourselves, because it is the bedrock. Financial literacy, financial capability, actually, is the bedrock to financial security and economic mobility. And I know you know that too.
Yeah, but I would agree with you, Carrie. I mean, one of the reasons I created She Money at my ripe old age with our incredible team is I was hearing story after story of folks, and to use, obviously I spent a lot of time with women, She Money, hello.
Yeah.
That's sort of obviously as a self-identifying, and as a woman, a self-identifying woman, I care deeply around women's financial well-being and other people and the world in general. And I found the same thing. I mean, even at Goldman, even me personally, I spent so many years, and I think this is so true. People spend so much time earning, right?
Yeah.
And that is a big part. But, you're head down, you're earning. If you have kids, you're taking care of kids, and you just kind of put the money to your side. I did that for many, many years. And even as someone who knew a lot, when I left Goldman, I went deep into understanding wealth management, and I still feel overwhelmed, and I think to your point, there's a lot of language, there's jargon, there's not knowing where to start. And, and again, it's one of the reasons I'm doing, and we need so many more people sort of out there championing around financial engagement, because it's not taught, in most of the schools. And if it is, actually, there was a really interesting nonprofit, I think it's called Rock Wall Street, something like that. You know the one I'm talking about.
Yes.
That's about encouraging girls to actually get careers in finance, and they do a mentoring program. And they said one of the reasons financial literacy, I mean, it's not only not taught, but teachers don't feel comfortable teaching it.
Absolutely.
Because they don't necessarily know themselves. So, thank you for saying that, because it is true for everyone, and the numbers tell that story that the vast majority of adults, let alone teenagers, cannot answer sort of basic questions around financial literacy. And I hate that word, literacy. It feels so judgy. I think you said capabilities, which I I kind
Yeah,
of love.
and that's what we refer to as when I was on the Obama Council, and he called it the U.S. or President's Advisory Council on Financial Capability. He changed it from financial literacy. It's interchangeable, but it means really action-oriented education. You can't. You have to know the work or know the how to do it, but then you have to act on it.
Yeah, exactly. And please feel free, by the way, to post comments. We are watching the chat. I have Shay helping me if you have questions, and we are going to start kind of macro and then drill down a little bit. I just wrote actually an article for She Money for this month, giving a lot of numbers and stats. I dug into the SHED study, which is new for me, the Survey of Household Economics, which actually said that in 2021, 78% of adults report doing okay or living comfortably. That said, we have almost a 12% poverty rate in this country. People are undersaved, obviously, for retirement, et cetera. So when you think about sort of the state, like what are measures that you look to and your foundation looks to as well to sort of give you indications of, kind of the how is the average is kind of a tough one too, but what are some of the things that you look at as a measurement of how well the wellness, the financial wellness of Americans today?
Well, you hit on a lot of, you hit on statistics, and I know your newsletter did too. But I mean, I'll just share some more that we look at, and you alluded to one, and that was the FINRA study, the financial capability study in 2019 that said 66% of Americans could not answer correctly 5 very basic financial questions. And that I know the authors of that. There's some professors and so forth that came to that. And so that's one way of understanding, what people's knowledge is. So 66% can't answer them. That's a pretty big percentage. And you mentioned about also many Americans not having in your newsletter, having an emergency fund of $400. At Schwab, we also conducted another study in addition to that, and that 57% of Americans can't come up with $1,000. And while that's, twice as much or more than twice as much than the 400, still, if you think about what things cost today, if a car breaks down or you have a medical issue, whatever it may be. And then the other one you alluded to, which I think is pretty scary, and that is, and this is just a recent one from the Census Bureau this year, that half of Americans over 55 have zero savings for retirement. Zero. Half. And so that, we know that retirement is going to be the most expensive thing you will ever face in your life. And unfortunately, Social Security just doesn't cut it, especially, if you're in more expensive cities. And then here's one last statistic I'd like to share, and that is, and this is recent, last year, that the American Psychology Association said that 65 Americans say that money is considered their biggest stressor. So you asked about how people are doing, and I would say, obviously there's many people doing well, but there's a lot of people in hardship, or if they do have some, somewhat of a crisis or a situation in their family, could be in a hardship.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And those numbers scare me. And frankly, again, it motivates me so much to do what we're doing because, I'd love to live in a world where, the government, I'm a Canadian, and there's a lot greater levels of social support in Canada. That said, it's still not everything. And to your point, we have inflation, the cost of living, and especially, under saving for retirement is something, that I think about a lot. I have an older, a lot of my mom's still living. But I think about that a lot. Like, what is it, planning and living on fixed incomes. So we had a question in the chat about what is financial wellness. And I'd be curious how you define it. I mean, we talk about, and I don't know if we can post it in the chat, Mwange, I hope I pronounced that right. Sort of financial wellness, it's different. People describe it differently, but I use it as how is your money serving your overall kind of wellness, and that your ability to provide for your essentials and have discretionary funds to provide for yourself and your family in a lot of different categories. And if you look up a wellness wheel, we tend to think of environmental, social, relational, occupational, environmental, I don't know if I said that, these different areas of wellness, and how much money you have, obviously very much influences all of those areas of your overall wellness. I mean, if you don't have enough resources, can you afford a therapist, or in the States, even afford health insurance? So money is often thought about as a spoke in the financial wheel, but we kind of put it at the center of the wheel because it's its own thing. And, how much money you have deeply informs your ability to take care of yourself and your family and all these other categories of wellness as well. Would you add anything to that, Carrie?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I mean, I think maybe I misunderstood the question, but people do say, what does financial literacy mean or financial capability mean? And to me, it's the knowledge and the action to know how to budget. And by the way, a lot of Americans don't even know how to budget. And we've done so many studies. It's amazing. So knowing how to budget, and living within your means, knowing how to save, or, actually doing it, saving and investing, and then using debt wisely. That's huge, because debt can be scary, but also can launch you, right? It's another way of providing wealth if you use it correctly. I'm not talking credit cards. I'm talking, and then lastly is knowing when something is too good to be true. And I kind of alluded to that already. Run as fast as you can if somebody's asking you for something, that's too good.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And yes, the question was around how to define wellness.
Okay.
Yeah. But thank you. Well, and I love that because, again, because we have she money, so we got to know a lot about money if we're going to, build a platform around it. And, to your point, parsing through, and maybe I'll go there before I back up on some of the questions, Carrie, because you hit on this. With respect to sort of this core definition of, when you think about financial literacy, you talked about having emergency savings, right? Like, what is savings? I mean, it is what is savings, what is borrowing, like what is investing. So there are a lot of what is associated with core financial knowledge. But if I forced you, and maybe you already said it, but I think it's an important question. If I force you to make a short list of the top, let's say 5 things that every person should try to do from a financial perspective, let's just say adults, right?
Yeah.
What would you say? What would be on your top 5 list?
Well, first of all, just know that building wealth takes time, and there is no such thing as a get-rich-quick solution. And as I mentioned, that gets back to, if it's too good to be true, run as fast as you can. So in terms of the things, some of the basics, one is planning. It sounds dull, and planning just means, even pencil to paper. How much money do I have? How much money do I owe? What is, my net worth, and what's my budget? Am I living within my means? And there's multiple studies that show that people who plan, again, simple little planning, save on average 300% more than those who do not. And that's about being intentional, right? Intentional in your life. The other is savings. That's the bottom line. That's the only way we can protect ourselves. We live in a world of doing it ourselves. So making sure you put money aside. And let me give you some good rule of thumbs for everybody. I share them with all young people, in particular in my life. But again, it's so critical to start early. And so if you start saving, I call it my -10 rule. So if you're in your 20s and you just started your job, you got a 401k or whatever, you want to save 10% for your retirement for the rest of your life, and you should have a relatively comfortable retirement. But if you're in your 30s, you minus the 10, you got to save 20%. If you wait to save in your 40s, you're going to have to save 30%. So you can see the longer you wait, the more you're going to have to save, which gets, as you get older, we all know that we have more responsibilities, financial responsibilities. So it's much better to start early. And then of course, investing, I've already mentioned that already, and then getting help, that there's no shame. And you alluded to this, Jacki, that it's overwhelming for you. I'm in the business. It's overwhelming for me. There's no shame in getting help. I even, I think it was in my 40s, I was, had a big job, traveling all over the country, had 3 kids, all in grade school and early, at a junior high. So I was a busy person, and I finally got help, and it's been the best thing ever. Lastly, one other thing is ask questions. Never, there's no such thing as a stupid question. And if you are getting help from a professional, if they make you feel bad about your questions, find somebody else.
Yeah, amen to that. Well, and thank you, Carrie. Those are great tips, and that sort of that, add 10 or drop 10 to your age thing. Cause, and actually interesting. I don't know if you saw it. Well, I would add just a couple things, and then I'll sort of bring in another question, which is, I think you said this, but have 3 to 6 months of expenses absolutely in a separate account that you do not touch for the love of Mary, for that are in emergency savings in high yield, absolutely. I mean, it used to be what's called the yield curve was very flat, that means the interest rates at, a short term versus long term, there was very little what's called pickup and yield. But that has changed a lot. You can now, earn, at least a decent amount, maybe not keep pace with inflation, but in a high yield savings account. So separate that money out, put it in account, segregated accounts for savings, I think is sort of generally just a great idea.
Yeah. We call it emergency fund. Yeah.
And basic things, too, in the protect area, like, have a will, those, even if it's just a basic one. But I was going to just mention this article. So I just flipped through the Times, and it was interesting. And I get this question all the time. And to be clear, I am not a certified financial planner. You have all the credentials and you wrote the books and you're an expert. I am just know a lot. I think I ask good questions. I can be a critical thinker when it comes to money. But I get this question about timing, and I will come to the chat as well. But, this idea, and so this article was looking about at a family that was sort of asking themselves this question between saving for retirement, current spending, lifestyle, paying down a mortgage, right? Or investing. And, because those are all different buckets, and thinking about what to prioritize, especially when, let's say, and I love the Refinery 29 money diaries. I use those a lot to tell, kind of develop an archetype, or, what would you prioritize in terms of if you're that person, obviously kids, no kids, things like that. So that's why it gets overwhelming, because there's so many factors that I know play into how you would answer a question like that. But do you have any rules of thumb when it comes to thinking about the order of borrowing, saving for retirement, and current investing and paying down a mortgage?
Yeah, well, let me start with savings, because they're sort of two different things, right? Obviously budgeting is really important. When my kids graduated from college, got their first job, we immediately went through their budget, how much money they were going to make and what they could afford. But right off the top, I had them take 10% off, because that was going to go to the retirement. So then they had to figure out how to live within that, the 90% of what they were what they were earning. But let me give you just some general rules of thumb, and then we could talk a little bit about debt. So we call them the savings fundamentals, or here's how to prioritize. And it's all based on, I'll call it rate of return, what you get back for it with these savings. So we talked about the 401k. Now, not everybody has access to it, but I would say a fair amount of Americans today do. And most companies do provide a company match. Not everybody, but a lot. And so you want to make sure you save in that retirement account up to the match, because that's free money. That's like doubling your return. Okay. So that's why, it's not only that's why, but you need, remember, we've already talked about that. We need that time. We need that compounding growth so that you can get that nest egg when you need it 40, 50 years later. So the 401, the retirement, then paying down any type of credit card debt. I'm not talking about home mortgage yet, but pay off credit card debt. We were just looking up the average right now with interest rates up. The average cost to borrow on a credit card is about 23%. That's almost a quarter of your purchase.
That makes me want to throw up in my mouth. I have to say, that's just brutal. If you're in that.
So that 20% can go into your savings, right? So 401k, you double your money, you earn 20 more percent if you get rid of those credit card debt. And then the emergency fund, which we've talked about, usually 3 to 6 months of cash to cover essential expenditures. But if you have a job that has inconsistent income, then you might want more money than 3 to 6 months. And if you're near retirement, you're definitely going to want to have more cash, right? So you can ride these ups and downs. And then, believe it or not, continue to save for retirement. That's just got to be just priority number one. Unfortunately, it's a drag. I know when I was younger, it's like, how boring, right? And but it'll pay off, I promise. And then that's when you start. Then after that, you've got retirement and everything. You've got that foundation. Then you can start thinking about saving and investing for a home or your children's college education. Parents hate that when I say get your retirement first. Your first, then your kids' college. Now, in terms of you already have debt, you definitely need to put that in your budget and pay it off, or continue to pay it off. You don't have to pay it off. You just have to put it in your budget and pay those payments so it does not hurt your credit score. That's really the biggest thing to do about that. And you mentioned, I think, paying off a house. Did you ask me about that?
Well, no, it was just this article was talking about the trade-offs. Do you invest if you have a mortgage and you have, let's just say you got a windfall, of money, though that's unusual, or this trade-off between all those buckets, like if you had a mortgage at 5% versus, putting that money in, or not retirement, let's just say that's taken care of. You're maxing out your retirement, the trade-offs between paying down different types of debt. Obviously, you already answered that. You should pay off credit card debt, high interest rate debt has just got to be, a top priority.
Well, home and college, need to continue to pay off again, because it can hurt your credit score. You've got to do that. Now, you mentioned having a windfall. Let's just say and this also applies to people who are in retirement. They're thinking, okay, I've got, I don't know what, I'm just making this up, $200,000 of cash. And if I pay off my home loan of $100,000, then I'll never have to worry about that payment. But if that interest rate is fairly low, that it depends on a bunch of factors. But if the interest rate's pretty low and you can afford it within your monthly earnings, then probably it may not be the thing to do unless you absolutely, emotionally need that. But keep in mind, then you lock that money in a house. A house is illiquid. And if you do have an emergency, you don't have that, that access to the cash. And then, of course, how you have your money invested all depends, on your goals and your risk tolerance and so forth, time frame.
Yeah. Well, and thank you. And that's
hard to explain. And,
well, it's hard. Like, we're giving a talk here in Utah tomorrow, a live one, and we've created like these archetypes, like the situation, like Janet, just graduated, has, this much in student loan debt, is earning this much, and you create scenarios. And the reality is not only is sort of kind of what you need to do a function of deeply, that's why it's called personal finance, because it's very personal. The finance part, there's rules of thumb, but the personal part is what's true for you. And I also think, as you recognized too, when you said, well, if paying down your house gives you a lot of peace of mind and reduces the stress and anxiety that you may have, there's also those trade-offs too. People have different tolerances for risk, at different ages. You might be much more able to make current income versus when you're older, obviously, and maybe feel more vulnerable. And I also want to just recognize, and I'll bring up I think a really important question, and thank you for the continued comments in the chat. We're going to try to get to as many as we can. But, this idea that it's, a lot of folks, millions and millions of people in America, and it's not, at all income levels, can barely, just make ends meet right now. And I just want to deeply recognize, that it is a time with inflation and the cost of living, especially live in cities, that, having extra money to invest or to do a lot of these things and is in itself a privilege for just a lot of folks, and not it's just just not that accessible. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, and we're focusing on some and deeply systemic reasons. And that sort of brings up this question I wanted to ask you, Carrie, around social and racial justice, and the financial lens to those are at the, have and always should be at the forefront of a conversation around this. And I know you've done a lot of work and advocacy, when it comes to what I would say, financial equity, financial equality. How do you think about that? And, how is that maybe even showing up in the work you do personally or with the foundation?
So I've, been talking about the lack of financial literacy being a social justice issue. And that is because it is, I'll call it unequal, within our system. There's, lack of access of products and services and investments for people to achieve, that financial security. And there's the lack of education. Again, you kind of need both to build that security. And we actually we conducted a study that 89% of Americans agree that the lack of financial literacy contributes to so many of the social issues that tear the fabric of our country. And those social issues, which we hear a lot about, is like poverty, lack of job readiness, college access, and wealth inequality. Those are just some of them. And so the lack of financial literacy doesn't always show up. It's not as obvious how it affects your day-to-day living. So for instance, if you made a bad decision early in your whatever career, whatever, you took on way too much debt, maybe you went into bankruptcy, maybe not, you just your FICO scores are super low, it could potentially haunt you from getting the dream job that you've always wanted. There are companies that actually look at your credit score, like for instance the military. They want to make sure you are military ready. They do not want you focused on anything else, not your money, not worried, and so forth. So and then of course we know that if you have a low credit score, any type of borrowing will always be more expensive than for somebody else who has a better credit score. So it affects you. And then, as you mentioned, so few schools require personal finance as a high school graduation requirement, but only 10% of students in under-resourced schools have access to financial education. So again, the access to education, knowledge, that's so critical. Even, like I said, college access. A lot of young people said that had they known about debt, really understood it, they would have never taken out as many college loans as they did. And then a lot of young people actually drop out, not because school's hard, but because they run out of money and they're in such debt. So that's how it creeps into our society, unfortunately. And as we know, Jackie, I know you believe this too. It's a life skill. It's an absolute life skill that drives economic empowerment and mobility. And to me, it's a game changer. It's an equalizer for everybody.
Well, thank you. And yes, I mean, and there was a couple of questions in the chat about, why isn't it, there's more financial literacy and great quality. And again, financial education, I would say. I mean, you think of all the things we learn, as, throughout our education, all the way up to, college, but certainly in high school. And I think it's fair to say, and I ask a lot of people this question, where did you learn about money? Do you remember, where did you first learn about it? And usually it's in the home. And that I've yet to hear anyone say, oh my gosh, I had the best financial literacy course in class, in high school. I learned so much. It put me on the path. Because that's just not really the case. And, again, Utah is one of the states that has it. How good is it? I don't know. But one of the things we're going to do here at She Money, being based in Utah, is go deeper to understand, the programs. I think they do need a lot of help and support from professionals to come in and teach it. And, don't be passive, saying, oh, they don't offer it for my kids. Therefore, not only how might you help your own children, but how can you help, other people's children as well that might not necessarily have the access or knowledge. And again, Carrie, when you look at, and I know obviously in addition to sort of a racial sort of equity lens, you've done a lot of work with the gender lens, which is what I've done. And, it's interesting because, there's we talk about a lot of gaps, and these gaps can be applicable, obviously with the racial and the gender lens. You talk about the wealth gap, which is huge in America, right? Median net worth of white households in America is 188,000, Black households 24,000, Hispanic households 36,000. And there's a huge gender gaps. I mean, there's still a pay gap, of course, the wealth gap. There's the retirement gap. You already mentioned that, saving for retirement, both by those lenses and just in absolute numbers. And also the investment gap, which has a very gendered component as well. So, I feel like there's this song in there, which is a sad song about way too many gaps when it comes to, money. And to your point, Carrie, it is good for everyone. It is good for our country. It's good for our communities. When people can be financially healthy and well. So I just want to, put an exclamation mark behind all of that, and when it comes to, I'm just curious, because you are, a woman that has done, as you said, a lot of programmatic work around sort of women and money. Do you have any just observations, especially you like me have been at this a long time, in terms of, some insights around why are we, and pick an area, because I mentioned about 4 million gaps that we're talking about. Yeah. But pick an area where you say, like, this gap, let's go, like, how do we narrow education, a big component of it. But when you talk about the narrowing some of these racial and gender gaps, and by the way, we're not talking about, men or white men or whatever, it's not like this, like draw one end down to lift another one up, right? We want to lift up those all that boats. Are right. All boats rise. So would love a few thoughts around, just sort of this conversation about gaps, maybe with a gender or racial lens, in terms of even work that you're doing to try to level up, and narrow some of these gaps with the idea of raising, not lowering.
Well, so, I mean, we're doing a lot around that. I don't even know where to begin, Jacki.
I know it's a big question. So I should have limited.
So, I don't know if you want me to talk about women or you want me to talk about what we do, at the Charles Schwab Foundation. You tell me.
Let's talk about women first, because this is She Money after all. We have many men on this call, which, and I hope, folks across the gender spectrum, but again, when the world is where there are no gaps, then we won't have to talk about it. But right now there are a lot of gaps. So I'd love your perspective on the gender gaps.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. And all of this kind of melds together, right? I mean, all the advice or all the learnings of how these gaps happen apply to everybody in some way or another. But in terms of women, I would say that it's been a systemic issue. There's the social and cultural differences that apply to both gender. And so women in particular, are a step behind, yet they need to be 2 steps ahead. And you've referred to this in a lot of your articles and so forth, is, 80 women earn 80 cents on the dollar. We tend to go in and out of the workforce to care for children or elderly parents. So we're losing income, right? Or earning years. We tend to live longer. Divorce, 50% in this country, and we know that most women get hit the hardest when it comes to that. And so what ends up happening is you put this all together, and women have more years of retirement but less money to save for it. So it's so important for women, for anybody really, again, to save and be very disciplined about it. Don't assume somebody else is handling it for you. Don't put your head in the sand. It doesn't have to be rocket science. So I call this sort of the macro micro, and that was the macro things. But this is sort of my call to action. You asked kind of for me personally, and that is the micro. Believe it or not, this lack of financial literacy, I'll call it, starts at home. And that's why my dad and I wrote the book, It Pays to Talk. Now that's over 20 years old. I love that book, but it's a little outdated now. But it's having the central conversations with your family about money and investing. And the impetus was that is there was a study that now they've had current ones that still show that it hasn't changed much. And that is that parents talk to their daughters differently than their sons. With their daughters, they talk about savings, household expenditures, budgeting. All super, super important. Everybody needs to learn that. But with their sons, they talk about borrowing and the stock market. And as we've been talking about, unfortunately, investing is key to wealth building because you can get that growth that you cannot get with other investments. And as a result, in the same study that we conducted, there was young men and young women, that the young men were twice as likely to have an investment account than women. So it starts at home. And I was speaking at a women's conference, Jackie, and believe it or not, this woman in the audience told me that when she was younger, now she was, I think, in her 50s, when she was younger, her father asked her to leave the room so he could talk to her brother about money. That was one of the worst stories I'd ever heard. But anyway, so the bottom line is sort of a call to action. We got to wake up, as parents, to start bringing everybody along. And in fact, when my 3 kids, got their first jobs, real jobs, I should say, with they got the the W-2 and so forth, I had them come down and open up a Schwab account. They had to come in, they had to open it up. They opened up the Roth IRA, and they have been saving for their retirement since they were about 16 years old, saving and investing. So that's, if you could get every young person to do that, and especially girls, since they do have more years to save or for retirement, it's really critical.
Yeah, thank you, Carrie. And there's just so much, and there's so many sort of comments in the chat around this as well. In the sense of, again, there's a lot to learn, a lot to do, and you just have to start somewhere. And I think, the industry, and I am very critical of, came from financial services. I was more on the institutional side, not on the retail side. But I mean, I think, I think Schwab, and I mean this quite seriously. I'm a client of Schwab. I was before you and I know each other. It's a low cost. There's a low barrier. You actually have, I'm not paid by Schwab. If you want to pay me, Carrie, I'm open to pay us.
You're a nice friend. Thank you. Yeah.
No, but I just mean it. Like, we're genuinely looking for platforms that are there to serve people, and there's nothing wrong. Businesses won't exist if they can't make money. And there were comments in the chat. There's a lot of predatory behavior, and it's most often folks that are lower income that get penalized the most and pay the most for these kinds of services. I mean, I went down the rabbit hole with payday loans, and I understand they serve a purpose. There's risk, but they, in my view, are absolutely predatory. And it literally made me weep, and in terms of folks that, need access just to keep, the lights on. So I think that, and it's interesting you say generationally, because I actually think this younger generation, I would say Gen Z, we have a Gen Zer over there that helps us with so much of this. And there's interesting, I said this, and I think I said this to you, Carrie, too, but I, asked Kiara over here and Shay across, like, where do you go for financial advice? And there's this, and they said a lot of influencers, folks on TikTok and on Instagram. And as an old schooler, maybe we kind of are like, oh, that makes me scared. But I don't know if I'm too scared about it. And I pull Kiara, maybe I'll paraphrase her answer to this question. And there are great ones. And I'm just going to name a couple that I love, including this woman. I don't know if you've heard about her, Carrie, but her name's Tori Dunlap. And she has a platform called Her First 100K. She's been getting so much press recently. But there are, Mrs. Dow Jones and others. And as Karen would say, it's fun, it's accessible, it doesn't talk down to me, it doesn't make me, it makes me curious about money, it makes it relatable. And then what happens is I think about it, then I go deeper. And I really think that's true. I think that financial education has been so much about, like, you're going to the dentist or the doctor, and it's, the experts and then the patient. And I think there's such a need to stir up the conversation, make it more relevant. Clearly you need to have good advice. There's no doubt about that. But I think that a lot of these, influencers, in my experience, and I love Tori and Mrs. Dow Jones and many others, that are telling their own stories, that are talking about how much they're making, talking about what things cost, are saying, in my experience, a lot of the same things you are and I am about emergency savings and don't get into debt and, don't buy the shoes, save for retirement. So I'm kind of encouraged that social media actually can have a really positive effect in terms of financial engagement. But what do you think? Do you have an opinion on it?
Well, I'm probably a little bit like you. I mean, I think there has to be a balance. I think social media meets people where they are, and that's a good thing. And we can get more people, more and more people can get exposed to financial, um, uh, you know, disciplines and so forth. But keep in mind, there's a lot of people out there with no credentials at all giving advice. So I would just say, Jackie, you already know some of the basics. So you know the questions to ask. You know when something's not right. But there's a lot of people who don't. And there's a lot of, lack of better words, quacks out there online. So I think it's fine. It's great. But just make sure that these people, are really credible out there. I will tell you in 2021, and I know you know this, or we all know this. Do you remember there was a flow of trading? Every brokerage firm had record trades, because I'm not going to name names, but it was the meme stock thing and also cryptocurrency, all the hype. And of course, that was all generated by social media. And those of us in the business were worried that these first time investors were coming in. We had a bull market for I don't know how long. And so everybody just assumed that the stock market would just go up. And now we're seeing, right? I mean, reality is hitting in where, potentially we could be going in a recession. We don't know, but, stock market's down, a lot of layoffs and so forth. So the bottom line is a lot of these people ended up in stocks that probably maybe worthless, maybe not very much, and people get scared and never come back to investing. And that's what I worry about. And speaking of, I'm gonna tout Schwab for a minute. We literally just launched an Instagram handle called Schwab Money Wise, or at Schwab Money Wise, and we're going to feature 5 certified financial planners to speak about all different issues and concepts and so forth about money. So again, love the social media, but it's got to be people that really know what they're talking about.
Yeah, I hear you. I agree with that for sure. And like you said, if things are too good to be true, they probably are. That's been my experience. Yeah. And again, you can get pulled in. I mean, I agree with you on the hype, especially the crypto hype. That's was there for a while. I mean, digital assets, are they an asset? It became very sexy. And a lot of people made a lot of money. A lot of people lost a lot of money. And my experience with investing too is, 30, 40 years later, I think it's tricky. And it's sometimes I would say this is true. Carrie, I'd be curious if you said this is true. Keep it simple, keep it diversified, and keep it liquid. And I know Schwab sort of prides itself, with low cost index funds now and ETFs, versus, products where obviously there are a ton of hedge funds and private equity. And if you have enough money, you're sophisticated enough and have a full-time accountant, on your team, sure, but, for most people, keeping it simple works, right?
Yeah, totally. I'm a big believer, and I'm a big believer in indexing, like you said. It's low cost. It's tax efficient. You when the market goes up, your account's going to go up. When the market goes down, it's going to go down, and it's well diversified. And you don't get you get that tax efficiency, which brings up more return for you in the long run.
Yeah. Well, thank you. we're getting to the top of the hour, so I want to be mindful to close. And I know there were some specific questions about accessing certain types of retirement vehicles, et cetera. I'm sorry if I didn't get to all of those. And I do want to just acknowledge, that we talk about some of these gaps. There's both a gender gap and a racial gap, and they hit hardest when they're intersectional, especially for women of color in this country, where they're hard hit by the gender impact as well as the racial impact, and just call out the goddess, Kimberly Crenshaw, for all her work to bring tremendous awareness around the intersectionality of all of these issues, especially when it comes to money.
Yeah.
So just
Melody
to wrap,
Hobson also, by the way, is another big advocate. Melody Hobson and Ariel
oh,
Capital.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, we've done a lot of work with them around creating more education and inspiration for Black Americans.
Yeah, thank you. And again, I think there's this balance, of really, to your point, which I love, of credible, like who's been in it a long time and who, has the credit, not necessarily a long time. I think there are a lot of like newcomers, too, that are, writers that have the credentials, that are deeply care about sort of people's financial well-being, that are, coming to the forefront as well. And one thing we're trying to do too, obviously Schwab, and there's so many money, like this little tiny little baby. But we're so passionate here. We want to help people have critical thinking when it comes to money, to help demystify sort of the process of thinking about it. We created this framework, Carrie. I don't know if you've really seen it yet, but we call it the 7 money moves, where we literally choreographed it to dance moves to help cognitively us think about it. Yeah, spend, invest, and plus I love dancing, so that just had to happen.
I did a rap. I did a money rap about 10 years ago. Yeah, on a big stage.
Oh, yes.
A rap producer. So anyway, go ahead.
Yes, no, well, just the importance of like finding a place, like if you're on this call and you're like, that's me and I need to do more, don't find that next step for you, because I do think I get this too, that it's, paralysis because you don't know what to prioritize. And we like to say, maybe it's a steal from, Brene Brown, is you don't need to do everything, just do the next right thing, just do something. And, find sources that speak to you, that you can relate to, that are credible, that, help you on that journey. Because, again, in honor, and I'll give you the last few words. Oh, shave. We've had 14 views of my money moves. Now I'm going to be really embarrassed that she actually posted the link to it. Kiara and I were like dancing it up. Just do thing. And, I think there's community. Start talking about it with your friends, create accountability groups, do it together. Everything is more fun. Well, not everything maybe, but, Carrie did a rap. Is that what you said? She's posting this. Oh, you did. Oh, we're going to find that and post that in the chat. If that's
I don't know where it is, but it was a long time ago. It's hilarious.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, we might have to find that one. I just want to, give you, and again, sorry if we did. Sorry, that's my Canadian coming out. If we did not get to your questions, but just final words, Carrie, and maybe I hope something optimistic that would be helpful. I don't want to, end on a Debbie Downer, and sorry to all Debbies on the call. But, when it comes to Financial Literacy Month, is there hope for, in terms of progress, and, anything you would just want to close with?
There is totally progress going on. I mean, it's slow. It's slow. I've seen multiple states take on financial literacy as a requirement. In fact, there's a bill going forward in California, which of course is the 5th largest or 4th largest economy in the world. So that, things are actually happening. But what I have found, Jacki, in my work, working with the Boys and Girls Club, and surveys we've conducted on young people, they really want to learn about money. They're very, very interested in it. In fact, our Money Matters program at Boys and Girls Club was for 20 years the fastest growing program, where kids wanted that knowledge. And so that to me that's the first step. Unfortunately, we do have a gap, but like you said, there's so many good resources out there as well to learn. So and unfortunately, we do live in a world of doing it ourselves. It doesn't have to be rocket science. Just go online, or there's schwabmoneywise.com, there's shemoney.com, whatever, and start learning about it. Just, take the bull by the horn and get started. So yeah. I think the fact that so many young people, in fact, I'll tell you one story. One of the young women at Boys and Girls Club, she lived in a very low resourced community, very, very, and she went to the Boys and Girls Club. An executive took her under his wing. She learned all about financial literacy from, the Money Matters program that we sponsor. She ended up going to college, which was unheard of in her community. She became a CPA for like Procter and Gamble. And then she started teaching all her friends. And that to me is success and makes me smile and hopeful for the future.
I love that, Carrie. And I think, one of my favorite movies, my family's is my husband and I is like Pay It Forward. And I think if you do, especially if you have that, to your point, and I grew up, I'm a first generation college student. I mean, I wasn't destined to be in finance. I grew up in a very small town, and, care about your community and think about how you can help and engage in a very local way. And again, people, as you said, there's so much financial stress that, is under the covers, behind closed doors. And, to be non-judgmental and to know that we're all in this together and want to be, support one another on our journey to financial wellness and to financial freedom is, something we can all participate in. So, Carrie, oh my gosh, this is so top of the hour. I think we might have to end with a dance party. Though that might be
there you
go. Thanks for joining, everybody. Carrie Schwab-Pomerantz, happy Financial Literacy Month. Thank you for joining us here on Show. Thanks for all who joined today. Really appreciate your time, and I hope you learned something. And we hope to see you again on another LinkedIn Live. And subscribe to all our socials and newsletters because, hey, we're very passionate about this, right, Carrie?
Yeah, we are. We've got a lot of good stuff.
Damn it, girl. We sure are. Okay. Thank you. Goodbye, everyone. Thanks
for
your time.
Bye, Jacki. Thank you.
Take care.